Magandang araw po mga kaibigan, magandang araw sa ating lahat. May kasaysayan ba ang kasaysayan? May kalayaan ba ang kalayaan? Ito po ang paksa natin ngayong araw na ito. Ilang araw na lamang ay pagdiriwang na natin ang sinasabing araw ng kalayaan sa ika-12 ng Hunyo na noon ay ika-4 ng Hulyo. Pero ngayong darating na Independence Day, kung tama ang schedule at hindi sasama ang panahon, pangungunahan ni Pangulong Benigno Simeon C. Aquino III ang pagdiriwang sa lungsod ng Naga sapagkat bibigyan daw naman ng pansin ang kontribusyon ng 15 Martires de Naga. Pero pag Naga City ang pinag-uusapan, meron din isang mahalagang lugar doon at yan ay yung bantayog ni Jose Rizal na kung gabi ini-istambayan ng ilang kababaihan na ang sabi nila ay mga makuapo ni Rizal. Pero if there's one thing na dapat bigyan natin ng pansin, sinabi po ni Ginoong George Wilhelm Frederick Hegel, ang pangungusap na ito, we learn from history that we do not learn from history. Naniniwala po ang inyong lingkod na bukod sa pagmimemorya ng mga petsa at mga naganap, kailangang mapalalim pa natin ang pag-unawa sa kasaysayan. Meron po bang kasaysayan ang ating kasaysayan? Hindi kaya nagmumura yung ating mga bayani sa nagaganap ngayon? Kung makabababa kaya sa kanyang bantayog sa Balintawak, si Gat Andres Bonifacio, marahil nagtungo na sa Malacanang at Senado at Kongreso at pinagtatagana ang mga naroroon. Ano kaya? Ano kaya nangyari kay Gat Jose Rizal kung nabalita niyang naghihikaho sa mga Pilipino at hindi magamot sa ospital na pag-aari ng pamahalaan? Ano kayang gagawin ni Ginoong Apolinario Mabini kay Secretary Albert Del Rosario sa pakikipag-usap sa Amerikano at sa Chino? Nagbigay kaya ng angkop na mga aral ang kasaysayan sa bansa? Naiwasan kaya natin ang mga problemang ito kung natuto tayo sa ating kasaysayan? Panauhin po natin si Atty. Manuel Almaro, isa po namang mamamahayag at isang nagsusuri din ng kasaysayan. Nasa pinakadulo po, siya po ayon sa kanya ay 80 anyos na. Kasama ko rin po, nasa aking kaliwa, si Atty. Pablo S. Trillana III. Siya po yung dating Grand Knight ng Knights of Rizal, 2008 to 2010. Pero siya ay delegado rin sa 1971 Constitutional Convention. Narito rin po si Ginoong Frank Hilario, isa ring manunulat at nagsusuri ng kasaysayan, at si Professor Wensley Reyes, isang profesor ng kasaysayan sa Philippine Normal University. Pag sinabi pong Philippine Normal University, may hindi tinatanggap dyan. Hindi ko nababanggitin kung ano yung hindi natatanggap. Pero maliwanag doon yung hindi nakakapasa sa entrance exam. Ano? Yun ang hindi natatanggap. Simulan natin. Simulan natin ang ating talakayan. Siguro, I'd like to have brief statements from our members of the panel. May kasaysayan ba yung kasaysayan? Kapabling, simulan natin. Is there anything that makes sense in our history?
Maraming salamat po. Before I continue, no? Yes. Ito pong si Melo ay matagal ko nang kasama. This was in 1998. This is the centennial of our revolution. Yeah. Independence, no? And since then, hindi kami nagkikita kung hindi a week ago when he called me up out of the blue asking me to be here with you. Of course, I could not say hindi ko mapahindian because kami po yung nagkasama nito. Of all places, talagang gustong-gusto ko naman yon. Yung sa CBCP po, you're still with them. Okay. So, maraming salamat sa iyo, Melo. I'm here. I do not know what to say because ako po hindi historian. I am a lawyer. Pero ako po may gustong-gusto ko po ang kasaysayan. Lao Tzu said, the way to doing is being. The way to doing is being. Meister Eckhart was saying, also to the effect essentially the same thing. Do not be concerned so much about what you want to do. Be more concerned about what to be. Ang kasaysayan po is not only a question of what to do. And that's why I think you emphasize it from the very beginning. So kasaysayan is not really a question of what to be. Kasaysayan should be a question of what to do, but what to be. And Lao Tzu had said that a long time ago. And even the Rig Vedas was saying something to that effect. The Rig Veda was 2,000 years older than us, older than Moses. Moses was 1,500 to 1,300 before the coming of Christ. The Rig Vedas was 2,000 years old. Now, 200, 300 years old. What did the Rig Veda say? Exactly what this Lao Tzu was saying. The Rig Veda was saying, there is only one truth, but there are many faces. Exactly with history. No, exactly with history. History, sabi ng iba, must constitute data. Without data, you cannot write well about history. But even if you have data, and data means exact evidence that you see, that's data in Latin. Now, when you have data, you interpret data. And therefore, history is simply a matter of interpretation. And I will always agree with you and doff my hat to you in your interpretation. There is no such thing as definitive history according to many, and I believe in that. Even this book that I have on my hands is not definitive, and he himself says it. This is Jaworski, the son of Jaworski, who prosecuted Nixon. And all of them are saying history is interpretation. Your interpretation, as well as your interpretation will be as good as history if you have certain facts to back it up. But interpretation is yours. Why? Because in the question of life, there are 4 quadrants. The first quadrant, the big quadrant, is the quadrant of the internal, which is 1, the internal individual, the internal, the collective. The other quadrant is the external individual, and then the external collective. What is the external collective? The external collective are everything that you see in groups, in society. You have lawyers, doctors, that's the quadrant of the 4th. That's where you live. That is in the stream of time and space. And Rizal was in fact saying, and I hope you don't forgive me if I ask of this, a very question from all of you. Interpret for me what Rizal said. Please, interpretation. There are 2 things he said, very, very good things. 1, non omnis moriar, because I'm a member of the Order of the Knights of Rizal. Sorry. Non omnis moriar. Not everything in me will die. This is not just Rizal. All religions will say not everything in you will die. To say that Rizal is therefore not spiritual is, I think, an interpretation again. The second one is the one I will ask you to tell me, because I want your interpretation. And I've been asking people about this interpretation. He says, will my life be like that of water, never to be lost into nothingness? Will my life be like that of water, never to be lost into nothingness? The first is a statement of fact. Nothing in me, not everything in me will die. The second one is a question. Why did he ask that question? And this is Rizal. Rizal has been called the great Malayan. What are the attributes that make him a great Malayan? And when we speak of Malayan, not only that he is a great Filipino, a great Malay stock. We are now in ASEAN. Next year, we will have one single block, the ASEAN Economic Community. Exactly how Rizal was foretelling it las Filipinas de años. In my mind, personal ko pong interpretation, you don't have to agree with me. Always question what I say. He said, to my mind, my interpretation, he had 7 predictions. 5 of them fulfilled. 2 not yet fulfilled. The 6th, in the beginning of fulfillment. The 7th, mababanaag na po natin. Not only visualize it, it is already happening. The present. Because history, to my mind, is a continuum. What is history? As I talk, immediately after I stop, that's already history. Now is now, when you hear me speak. The future is after I've spoken. Mm-hmm. But before I speak, after I've spoken, they say that's history. But history, to my mind, is a continuum. It's a continuum. That is why David Bohm, one of the best physicists in the world today, is saying, we are all one. We are all one. Why, he was saying? Because all possibilities and all dreams on this world have been in the mind of the divine since the beginning of time, before time and after time. And therefore, what you must do is precisely get in your personal legend in your life that particular vision, that particular dream, and then embed it in your heart, and then bring it about into an embodiment of that dream in your personal legend. This is your personal history. Sorry, it took me a long time to introduce, but I think if you will ask questions of me, please phrase it in that, because that, I think, is where Kasaysayan's not only interpretation, but I think Kasaysayan's reason is.
Thank you.
Salamat po.
Okay, simula pa lang yan. Opening statement pa lang yan. We'd like to acknowledge our good friend Linggoy and Sol Vancy. Okay. Mang Maneng, matanong kita, kayo po yung nagsusuri, may kasaysayan pa ba? May katuturan ba ang kasaysayan?
Thank you, Melo. I am a journalist and not a historian. So, as a journalist, our concern is the present.
Pakilapit lang po ng mikropono mo.
The present, yeah. Our concern is the present. So, to me, the past is only a tool for understanding and examining the present. So as journalists, we try to put a background to our stories, which are contemporary. And that background is history. Without history, we will not know the present. And without history, we will not know, or without understanding the present, with history as the background, we will never know how to craft our future. Thank you.
Mang Maneng, who writes history? Dahil ang sabi nila, yun lamang mga nagwawagi at yung mga naghahari ang nakagagawa ng kasaysayan ayon sa kanilang pananaw at ayon sa kanilang karanasan. Yung mga talunan, walang karapatan daw magsulat ng kasaysayan.
Well, you know, history is written by historians. So, in writing history, they research, and they research from materials which came from ancient times, recent times, you know that there are records of history which the historians use. Sometimes it is physical writing, sometimes it is geologic or whatever, but there is no lack of materials for writing history.
Laging meron.
Laging mayroon.
Okay. Mula sa isang taga-Philippine Normal University, Professor Reyes, ano po ang inyong pananaw sa kasaysayan once you face your students, anong pinararating nyo sa kanila tungkol sa kasaysayan?
Una po sa lahat, magandang umaga at maraming salamat po sa pag-imbita sa gawain ito. Sa tingin ko bilang isang historiador, responsibilidad ko na ipaliwanag yung mga detalye ng pagtingin sa history versus kasaysayan. Actually, malaki po ang problema natin dito dahil nalilito yung mga tao kung ano nga ba yung mga bagay na tinatalakay nila pag pinag-uusapan ang history/kasaysayan. Nagkaroon kasi ng literal na translation or nagkaroon ng pagsasali na direkta na ang kasaysayan daw ay history din at the same time. Pero if we're going to be by the book, no, history are events which happen in the past. They are recorded events which happen in the past. So mahalaga yung elemento na ito'y nakasulat. No, kaya po sinasabi natin na sa kasaysayan may prehistory at merong history. So yung prehistory, ito yung panahon na hindi pa marunong magsulat yung tao, no? Nagkaroon ng kaalaman sa pagsusulat, ni-record niya. At ito yung panahon ng tinatawag nating history. At ang history, basically ay Western idea. History, no? Compared sa ating kamalayan, na ang ating pinanggagalingan salita, pag sinalin ang history ay kasaysayan. Sa literal na kahulugan, ang kasaysayan ay salaysay na may saysay para sa isang grupo ng taong pinagsasalaysayan. And when we talk about history, sa kabilang side, we are very particular with details, places, events, people. Ang problema, ang kultura natin ay hindi partikular sa mga tao, lugar at panahon. Kasi ang mahalaga sa atin ay saysay, kabuluhan ng isang kwento. Kaya po, kitang-kita dito, saan ka galing o nasan ka na? Ang sabi ay nasa LRT na ako. So, anong oras na? Kanina lang ako dumating. Wala tayong partikular na oras, partikular na lugar kasi ito ay nakapaloob sa ating kultura na mas kamalayan, mas mahalaga ang saysay, ang kabuluhan ng isang kwento. At pagdating natin sa classroom, ang nangyayari, pinipilit natin yung detalye ng istorya ay kabisaduhin. Kaya nawawala ng saysay ang kasaysayan dahil hindi bahagi ng kwento yung nag-aaral nito. Kasi doon sa salaysay na may saysay para sa isang grupo ng sinasalaysayan, kasama ka sa kwento. At ito po yung maganda, pag kasama ka sa kwento, makikialam ka. At kapag kasama ka sa kwento, gusto mong malaman yung kwento.
Okay. Mahalaga ito. Maganda to. Okay. Ngayon po, pakinggan natin ang pananaw ni Ginoong Frank Hilario.
He who forgets history is bound to repeat it. Pupurihin ko lang yung theme na nahirapan akong mag-translate. May kasaysayan ba ang kasaysayan? May kalayaan ba ang kalayaan? May kalayaan din akong mag-translate. So, ito ang aking translation. Free. Can we find liberation in history? Can we find freedom in independence? Yun ang aking translation. I would like to congratulate yung gumawa nung team. Maganda. Hindi ko pwedeng mapantayan. May paning ito. Ang galing eh.
Salamat po. Pero katulad niyan, merong mga iba't ibang pananaw sa naganap sa Pilipinas. Kung susuriin ang mga aklat na nalathala at kung titingnan, iba yung bigay ng diin ni Gregorio Saide sa pananaw ni Agoncillo at iba rin ang pananaw ni Renato Constantino. Iba't iba ang pananaw sa mga nangyayari. Alin kaya dito sa mga kasaysayan, bahagi ng kasaysayang ito, ang mayroong pang significance sa atin ngayon? Let's start. Atty. Trillana. Sige nga po, tingnan natin.
Sinabi ko nga po kanina, history is simply a matter of interpretation. Look at the trial of Bonifacio. Yun na lamang po. Hanggang ngayon pinag-uusapan natin si Bonifacio at saka si Aguinaldo. Who will end that? You get Saulo's book about Agoncillo. About Aguinaldo. He will have a different interpretation from somebody who wrote about that particular incident in our history in terms of Bonifacio. So, they may have different facts. In fact, that thing about Bonifacio and Aguinaldo recently had a long article, kung mapapansin mo, sa aking kaibigan, si Ambet Ocampo. 3-part article yon. Ang sinabi po niya, ang sinasabi niya, itong isang historia na ito ay mali. Namatay si Bonifacio on May 10. Ang sabi ng historiang isa, mali. Namatay si Bonifacio April 26. So you see, depending on the facts that they get, they will have an interpretation. Ang sabi ng isa, pumunta ka sa Maragondon, makikita mo, nakalagay doon. Ang nakalagay, dito nilibing si Bonifacio, yung April 26. Meron pong marker doon. Yung trabahadores. Nakalagay doon. Nilibing nila, sabi nila. Somebody naman said, di ba, sabi ng ibang historians, nag-trial. Hindi lang sa Bonifacio, doon, sa Naik. Andun pa ang kanyang monument, ang kanyang kwan. There is a beautiful, beautiful museum there. But they're saying the trial was a fake. Why? Because if you look at the documents, the trial, yung pumirma, is a fake daw. It was a fake. So, yun ang judge advocate na pumipirma. Kung pumirma ang judge advocate that tells the story of the whole trial, fake yun, that entire trial must be a fake. Alam pa lang po nyo. Interpretation lang po to, ha? May mga accounts. O, yan, sinasabi ko sa iyo eh. Yung sinabi mo, may kasaysayan ba sa kasaysayan? Meron bang freedom in our freedom? Interpretation na naman po yan. If you look at interpretation and freedom in terms of physical freedom, siguro yung iba meron, yung iba wala. If you talk of freedom in terms of your freedom as an individual, iba na naman po yan. So anong freedom to? Tell me, what are we supposed to speak here? You define. I'm sorry.
Ayos yan. Maganda yan. Maganda yan. Lalagumin natin yan.
That's why I said from the very beginning, the more important thing, the way to do is to be. In the final analysis, it's not what you do. People interpret it. Julius Caesar was interpreted so many. Oh, in fact, ang ating pong kaibigan na well admired sa United States, sino ba yon? Sino nag-remove ng slavery nila?
Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln.
Sino po? Si Abraham. Si Abraham Lincoln. Look at several books of Abraham Lincoln. Ang isang libro, historian po yan, nagsasabi, racist si Abraham Lincoln. Napuwersa siya because he needed a bilateral decision in order to bring about that law that removes slavery. Yeah. So interpretation din po yun. So where is the freedom?
Okay. Yes, Frank.
There is the freedom to interpret. Meron akong kasaysayan na yung noong i-declare ni Aguinaldo ang independence, ang aking alam ay meron dong kabyat. Maybe not kabyat, but it says that in so many words, the Philippines was still under the tutelage of the United States of America. So, is that independence or not?
Maganda yan. Professor.
Yes. Why do we study history? One simple answer is for us to know the truth. Katotohanan. Ang problema, truth is elusive. So kailangan mag-imbestiga tungkol sa nakaraan. That's why we have different facts. Pero regardless kung anumang facts ang lumalabas, ang mahalaga po yung sinasabi ni Sir kanina, may interpretasyon. Pero gusto ko lang dagdagan, kailangan natin ng kolektibong interpretasyon as a nation. At kapag meron tayong kolektibong interpretasyon as a nation, we decide which is important. At doon nagkaroon ng kabuluhan yung kasaysayan. Marami po tayong Independence Days. Sa tatlong colonial powers meron tayo. No? I could give dates, no? June 12, October 14, and July 4. ito yung mga famous na independence dates natin. Pero sa tatlong ito, balikan po natin, sino po ang merong karapatan o kakayahan na mag-declare o magsabi na ito yung pinaka-independence date namin?
Alright. Mang Maneng.
Tama yun si Atty. Trillana. That it's a matter of interpretation. Pero yung interpretation natin must be in accordance with the facts. So, as a journalist, as I said, my concern is the present. Ngayon, ang pinaka-importanting problema natin dito sa Pilipinas ay ang kahirapan, poverty. Bakit tayo mahirap? Hindi ba tayo ang mga ancestors natin lumaban para sa liberty, freedom, and independence para tayong malaya at para tayong maging prosperous. Kaya nang sinabi ni Rizal sa kanyang mga sinusulat, bakit tayo mahirap during the colonial times of Spanish times? Kasi ang kumukuha ng kayamanan natin, Espanyol. Sila ang may-ari. Sila ang nagkokontrol ng ating gobyerno. At sila ang humahawak ng ating kayamanan. At sila ang nag-aalipin sa ating mga tao. Kaya silang nagre-rape, kumukuha ng mga prutas ng mga trabaho ng mga Filipino. Paano natin makuha yung magiging prosperous at makuha natin ang sarili nating resources dito sa bayan natin? Ang sabi ni Rizal, independence. Yun ang sinabi niya sa Nulumitang El Filibusterismo at lalo na doon sa kanyang essay, The Indolence of the Filipinos. Kasi nung sinulat niya ang Indolence of the Filipinos, sagot niya doon sa sinulat ng isang Espanyol na kaya tayo mahirap dahil na tayo tamad. Sabi ni Rizal, hindi tayo tamad. Kaya lang tayo mahirap dahil na alipin tayo eh. Kaya sabi ni Shakespeare, the trouble with us, dear Brutus, not in our stars, but in that we are underlings. Underling tayo. Ngayon, mahirap pa rin tayo. Bakit tayo mahirap? Kaya siguro kaya tayo mahirap, hindi pa tayo malaya. Hindi ba hindi natin ina-exercise ng ating independence? Yun ang ating sagutin ngayon. Para malaya tayo, maging tunay na malaya tayo at ma-solve natin yung problema natin ng kahirapan ng mga Filipino.
Pero Mang Maneng, wala nang Kastila eh. Ganito pa rin tayo. May cellphone nga lang. Ano po ang sitwasyon? Bakit? Sa inyong pagsusuri ng kasaysayan, bakit kahit malaya na tayo, ito pa rin ang mga concerns na kinakaharap natin?
Bago ako dumating dito, kinopya ko itong paragraph from the book of Stanley Carnot. In Our Image, America's Empire in the Philippines. Yun is sinulat na 1989, after our 1986 revolution. Ngayon naghanga lahat ng mundo dahil na nagkaroon ng revolution dito sa Pilipinas. Ano ang sinabi ni Carnot, Stanley Carnot? Carnot was a journalist, at the same time a historian. Itong libro niya nagkaroon ng Pulitzer Prize.
Okay.
Nanalo ng Pulitzer Prize for History.
Okay.
So itong sinabi niya, despite its modern trappings, the Philippines was, at that time, 1989 ito, still a feudal society dominated by an oligarchy of rich dynasties which had evolved from one of the world's longest continuous spans of Western colonial rule. Dinagdag pa niya that the United States preserved the archipelago as an agricultural society dependent on the American market. It also perpetuated the power of the Filipino upper class, which derived its wealth from the land. Saan ang galing yung ating feudalism? Galing sa Spanish colonization. Pineperpetuate ng Amerikano. Hanggang ngayon, sabi ni Stanley Carnot, nangyayari pa rin sa Pilipinas. Hindi pa rin tayo malaya. Ngayon, kung tanungin niyo ako, naniniwala ako sa sinabi ni Stanley Carnot.
Very well. Atty. Trillana, maraming nangyari na sa kasaysayan wala na yung Kastila, wala na yung Amerikano, nawala na yung Hapon, kanegosyo na natin. Sabi nyo, great Malayan si Dr. Rizal, Malaysia has overtaken the Philippines by leaps and bounds as far as GDP is concerned. What really ails Philippine society if we are to learn anything from history?
Okay. Maraming salamat, kapatid. Let me just say, this is again my interpretation. From what I'm reading and from what people are telling me when I talk to them. I think the Philippines is way up above so many other countries now in Asia, in our part of the world. Our GDP is 7.2 last year. GDP is 7.2 because you were speaking of GDP. 7.2 last year. This year it's 6.2. This first quarter it dipped down. But according to the economists, well, my good friend economist sumusulat, it will go back to something like 6.2, 6.4 this whole year. If you look at it whole year, not just the first quarter. Now, what am I saying? Ang pinakamataas po sa GDP is China. But China is having problems. Why? Because tumataas ang wages nila at nagkakaroon din sila ng mga unrests. So, what is happening? Another one, if you allow me. Just to show to you that the Philippines is going up. I'm not speaking for the presidency now. I am looking at the stream of time and space. Yung sinasabi ng ating kaibigan, you cannot just look at it from one particular segment. You have to look at the stream of time and space to find out where we are, where we've been, where we are going now. The Philippines is second now in GDP. Fortunately, and people do not agree, and it's not been publicly announced, but we have been growing for the last 10 years in GDP. In the last 10 years, even under Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo, even under the scandals of Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo, our economy was inching until it got to 6.2, 7.2 last year. Ang laki-laki noon, ha? So when you look at China and the Philippines, tayo ngayon ang pangalawa in GDP. In all of Asia, even Japan, in all of Asia, even Singapore. Okay? That's economics na sinasabi natin. GDP lang po yan. Hindi yan po ang economy lamang. Now, what is our demography? Our demography, what is our median age? 23. What is our population? 98. In 2-3 years' time, we may have 100 million, rather, 98 million, 100 million. What is the median age of the other countries that have been the colonizers before? Or the countries that tulad nila, Japan. What is the median age of the Japanese? 90. 90 compared with 23. What is the median age in Europe? Almost mataas din. Even in the United States. So, where is the Philippines now? Now, nakikita ninyo, alam naman niyo ang IT. Alam naman ninyo ang business operations ngayon. Business, yon ganon. Yan pong yan, tsaka ibang other criteria are already, as I said, bringing us towards something higher economically. Ngayon, yung sinasabi po ninyo, why are we still like this? In terms of, why is there a disparity in terms of income? You're talking of income. Sa income po, talagang there is such a big disparity. But when you talk of income, you must talk of wealth. There is a distinction between wealth and income. Income is what you get when you are a laborer. That's the income tax. Wealth is not being taxed much. And where is the money? It's in the wealthy. Ever since, who had our wealth? The ones who had our wealth were sorry, but the Spaniards. And before the Spaniards, there were many wealthy datus. So it's just a question of bringing it from one hand to the other, but the essence is the same. So where are we going? This is where I ask you at the beginning. Yung sabihin ko sa inyo, tinanong niya, will my faith be like that of water, never to be lost into nothingness? Kaya tinatanong ko po sa inyo, ano interpretation ninyo dyan? Because I think that's the answer to what you're saying.
Thank you. Frank.
Yung GDP, beautiful GDP, gross domestic product, walang meaning yan sa mahirap eh. Consultant ako dun sa Darano. Wala kami ng Bangal La Union, Sampabian, Pangasinan. Sino ang yumayaman? Yung farmer masipag. Always masipag. Hindi naman lahat, pero many of them masipag. Pagdating ng harvest, or right after harvest, sino ang may laman ng bulsa? E di yung trader, yung merchant, doon, hindi yung colonialism. If there is colonialism in the Philippines, it is the Filipinos who are abusing the other Filipinos.
Okay.
That's your economics.
So, yun din yung kulturang Pilipino tago, Pilipino turo. Ganun din yun. Frank.
What do you mean?
Kultura ng Pilipino yun.
Hindi. Kultura ng yan? Ng
Ibang
American, European.
Okay. O sige. Yes, Professor.
Yes. I think freedom and power are related. No? He who has freedom has power, but the character of the person who has power is more important. Paano ngayon po to? May kalayaan po tayo ngayon to interpret historical events in the past. Pero hindi natin ginagamit yung kapangyarihan to interpret para magbigay ng saysay ito sa kasalukuyan. Halimbawa po, Independence Day is fast approaching. As people, what is the essence of Independence Day? Masasagot nila yung date kung kailan, pero hindi nila alam bakit nag-exist itong specificong pangyayaring ito. At kapag hindi nila alam kung bakit ito nag-exist, ang tendensiya nila ngayon ay tignan lang ito bilang bahagi ng mga bagay na kailangan kabisaduhin sa school. Pero wala talaga itong saysay sa kasalukuyan. So, dahil nga binigyan mo sila ng kalayaan at hindi sila handa sa kalayaan na gamitin ng mahusay, ang tendensiya, hindi nila ginagamit yung kalayaan ng maayos.
Okay. Bakit may mga Pilipinong hindi na nagbibigay galang pag pinatutugtog ang pambansang awit? Bakit hindi na tumitigil sa lansangan kung itinataas ang watawat sa mga paaralan? What has happened to us? Professor. Sige, Professor.
It has something to do with education. Coming from the education sector, sa tingin ko malaking bagay po kasi kung paano natin ginawang robot yung mga estudyante para lamang sumunod sa isang ritual sa halip na ipaunawa at ipaintindi sa kanila ano yung kabuluhan ng mga pangyayaring ito. Very mechanical ang ating educational system. Papasok sa umaga, lupang hinirang, panatang makabayan, same routine every day. Yung bata, sa halip na maintindihan niya bakit niya ginagawa niya yon dahil force of habit. Dahil ito yung nakasanayan. At hanggang paglaki niya, gagawin niyang katatawanan yung mga bagay na dinaanan niya ng bata. That's why, ang mangyayari, matanda na sila, tatanda sila, hindi nila nakita yung esensya nung dinaanan nila ng kabataan nila.
Okay. Frank, bago ko matanong si Mang Mani.
I'm a teacher, so I must blame the teacher.
Partly, sir. Partly. Kasi hindi pwede na isa lang ang sisihin. Sistema po ito. Isang buong sistema. No? Tao, yung estudyante mismo, sa bahay mismo. Kasi ang problema, yung teachers, magtuturo sila, pero pagdating sa bahay, yung kalayaan ng magulang sobra absolute, no? Sinasaktan yung bata, pagdating niya sa school, tuturo nung teacher na masamang manakit. So, it's a system sa loob ng lipod.
Hilo yung bata.
Teacher pa din yung parent eh.
Oo nga, kaya lang, kung ang teacher yung teacher sa bahay, nasa abroad at nagtatrabaho, may problema tayo.
Correct.
Isang bagay yan. Mang Maning, nung kabataan ninyo, di po ba? Mga ilang taon pa lang naman yun. Yung bang paggalang sa watawat, tinuturo, yung ba ilikas sa atin? Dahil hindi ko makita sa Pilipino yung patriotism ng mga Vietnamese. Nung magkaroon ng problema doon sa kanilang karagatan, Tumayo yung mga Vietnamese kahit kokonti at sinasabi, hoy mga Chino, umalis ka. Eh sa Pilipinas, sa pinagkakaguluhan ng kabataan, Westlife, saka One Direction. Bakit ganon?
Pero sa akin, Melo, hindi yung paglalagay natin ng kamay natin sa ating breast na nagpapakita na tayo patriotic. Ang katotohanan na patriotism, kagaya ng ginawa ng mga Vietnamese, na kinalaban nila yung mga Amerikano na gusto na mag-aapi sa kanila. So, kaya kailangan malaman natin ang tunay na kasaysayan. Kagaya ng sinabi ni Atty. Trillana na tayo ay mayroon pinakamataas ang ating GDP, 7.2%. Second to China, 7.4% lang yung China at this time. Kaya kailangan ng kasaysayan parang malaman natin kung ano ang nangyari in the past. What was our GDP growth in the past 20, 50 years? That is what determines the present. Not the present determines the present, but the past determines the present. So kung makikita mo kung anong GDP natin for the past 30 or 50 years, yung po mga 1 to 2% lang, 2 to 3%. Sabi ng mga ekonomista, you need 7% growth in order to emerge into a really prosperous country for about 10 years or 20 years. So actually, ang nangyayari, ang GDP growth natin until this came about ngayon na si Aquino ang naging presidente, umabot ng 7.2%. Pero ang tingin ko, yun naman dahil sa karoon ng bagong sirkumstansya, nagkaroon tayo ng dalawang election 1972, the past 2 or 3 years. Yung election na yan, gumagawa ng activity yan na sinasama sa GDP. But the election does not produce anything except laway. Circulation.
Okay.
So, ang ibig sabihin, bakit tayo naging mahirap? Ang GDP natin only 2 to 3% for the past 50 years. Kasi agricultural tayo eh. Bakit naging agricultural ang economy natin? Ganyan ang sinabi ng Amerikano. Noong 1909, they passed the tariff bill, requiring us to have a free trade with the United States. Inupos ng ating gobyerno yan. Inupos ni Quezon Newsmania at ni Rojas. Kasi masama yung free trade. Ibig sabihin, mag-i-import lang tayo ng kailangan natin sa Amerikano ng industrial products, ang produce lang natin agricultural. Kaya tayo mahirap. Walang bayan dito sa mundo na naging mayaman kung hindi industrial. Pero ang ginawa ng Hapon, ng Amerikano at saka yung Espanyol, ginawa tayong agriculture at tayo naman sumusunod. Dapat wag tayo sumunod yan.
Okay.
Mapapakita natin malaya tayo pag hindi tayo sumunod sa dating mga colonial masters natin.
Very well. We will open the floor to our friends from the media. However, let me warn our friends from the media, the topic is history and independence. Please don't ask questions outside of it. You may ask questions about what's going on today as far as history is concerned, but let's start with this. Ladies first.
Is her story. Okay. Salamat po. Ang tanong ko po pagdating sa kasaysayan ay tungkol sa nabanggit ni Attorney, thank you, Trillana, tungkol sa pangalawang katanungan. Kasi ang pagkasabi niyo po, na binanggit niyo kanina, yung mga quadrants, not everything in me will die. First part yun, pero will my life be like that of water, which turns into nothingness? Ang sagot ko po dun sa katanungan ay steam. Yung tubig na pupunta sa kawalan ay nagiging steam, pero ibig sabihin na transform. So ang katanungan ko pagdating sa kasaysayan, na-curious ako dun sa sinabi niyong predictions ni Rizal. Kasi kasaysayan yon na maaring hindi alam ng iba. Dahil ang tingin ko sa kasaysayan ng interpretasyon ninyong lahat na yan, parang kanta. Pamilyar kayo sa Ang Dahil Sa'yo. dahil sa'yo, pamilyar kayo. Pamilyar din kayo sa Moon River. Pero lahat, yung kantang yan, Tagalog man o English, pwedeng kantahin ng tango, ng rap, ng rumba, ng cha-cha. Ganun ang sinasabi ninyong lahat. Isang kasaysayan, iba-ibang interpretasyon, iba-ibang mukha. Pero ang nagbibigay ng kahulugan ay yung taong dumadama kung ito ay cha-cha, kung rumba. Tama po ba? Okay, kung gano'n, yung perspektibo po ng kasaysayan binabanggit ninyo, pwede po bang malaman dun sa sinabi ninyo na 7 predictions ni Rizal, na 5 ang natapos na, isa na namumukadkad na, at yung isa ay nababanaag na. Dahil perspektibo rin yun. Kasi yun ang sinasabi nating kabuluhan talaga.
Okay.
Thank you.
Atty. Trillana, please.
Maraming salamat po. Sabi ko nga po kanina, that's my own interpretation. But you can read that from Rizal. These are from ang unang-una po dyan is the Philippines a Century Hence. Las Filipinas dentro de 100 años, which was published in La Solidaridad 1889-1890. Most of his predictions are there. I call it predictions. Actually, he says, perhaps it will be like this. What was his first prediction? That you can, if you were at that time during his time, if you are living during his time, probably if you are kayo yung mga newspaper women po ba? Newspaper man? Makikita kagad nyo what is the coming, the near coming, the forthcoming. One, he said, we will revolt. That was 1888, 1890. We revolted 1896. So makikita naman yun because if you are siguro cognoscente sa ginagawa, you would know that the revolution might be coming. Perhaps you would always say, perhaps. Because, and it did happen in less than 8 years. Masisense mo na, yes. The next one is, he said, you will declare independence. In 1899, we declared independence through Aguinaldo. Di po ba? 1898. The third one, he said, but you will fight for that independence and that freedom with blood and rigor. We fought the Filipino-American War. How much did the Americans spend? $300 million, more than we spent vis-a-vis the Spaniards. And we fought the Americans so much more bravely, really, because nananalo tayo eh. Okay, the fourth one, he said, one day, a country across the Pacific will take away that independence away from you. When did the Americans come to take it away from us? No, 1890, 1891. They were 1891 po, 1898 when they already had the yung kanila pong mock battle. The mock battle here. So binigay na ng mga Americans, pinagbili pa tayo for sa Spaniards ang $20 million, ano? 18 okay. Then he said we will fight for independence with vigor. But then he said one day after nakuha tayo ng Amerika, no? Then he said the fifth prediction, one day Japan will swallow us. Look at that in the manifesto of Rizal before he died. Mga two weeks before, nagmanifesto po siya. Kung ayaw nyo, tingnan po ninyo sa kay Leon Maria Guerrero, nandun po yun. The fifth, ha? Nakikita nyo, 1889, 1890, or close to his death, sinabi na niya, Japan will swallow us. Japan swallowed us in 1841. 1941. Nagkakamali na po yung matatanda. 1941. Correct. 100 years lang po naman daw. 100 years late. Ano? Anyway, that's the fourth. Kita niyo po, ay the fifth. Kita po niyo, ang predictions ni Rizal, ay tamang-tama na yan. Napakaganda po ang kanyang batting average. 2 na lang ang hindi. And what do I read from from the Inquirer, from Father Bernas? After the Bangsamoro agreement came out, I could not read all the details, But you see, if you read the Bangsamoro, the framework of that is between the Bangsamoro government and our government. And in that Bangsamoro, it's still under our sovereignty, but the powers are shared. One exclusive for us, foreign power, etc., defense, hindi makukuha yan ng Bangsamoro. But Bangsamoro also has an exclusive to the Bangsamoro. And then there is a concurrent between the two. Then there is one sa kanila. What is that? That is already the beginning of a federal government. Tingnan ninyo, ang Amerika. That's a federal form already. And this is what Father was saying. We are already seeing the glimmers of a federal form of government. So that's the sixth prediction. Hindi pa lang nangyayari because hindi pa po na-approve yung ating law on the Bangsamoro. Pero pag na-approve yun, makikita niyo pala. Tama pala sinasabi ni Rizal. Oh. Now, what is the seventh? The seventh is this. He said, when you remember the past and you have regained your good old qualities, one day you will enter, perhaps, the wide road of progress. Two very important conditions. Remember the past and recover your good old qualities. Chow Gukjukwa, if you remember, alam niya, Chow Jukwa. That is 13th century. 13th century Chinese, tulad ni Morga. Morga was 1569. Morga Antonio. 13th century, nakikipag-trade na tayo sa China. Ano ang sabi ng chronicler ng China? Ang ating trade sa mga Pilipino, magdadala sila ng kanilang mga trading goods. Ay, doon po tayo sa mga taga-ilog eh. So, we're around the sea coast. Babagsak daw nila ang mga trade goods nila, ibibigay sa mga Pilipino, yung mga natives, bibigay sa kanya-kanila, then they'll go into the hinterlands to sell. And then, after several months, babalik ang ating trader from the China. He will come back. And when he comes back, all the Indios, or the natives, will be there to pay everything to the centavo. What is that? The good old quality of the Philippines.
Okay. Napakaganda nun ah. How I wish marinig natin kay Napoles ito at kay Ben Hurloy. No? Makaluoy-luoy, sabi nila.
Pero unahin muna natin matanda.
Sige, okay. Sige, May kasabihan dyan, Aya, sabi nila, respect the centavo. Go ahead.
Ewan ko kung napapasin nyo rin ito. No?
Pakilala po kayo sa mga kasama natin.
Sa DWSS, Popo Villanueva. Sa history natin, napapansin ko, ang DNA pecha at saka pangyayari. Polo Bataan, Port Corridor, April 9, May 10, death of Rizal. Okay. Bakit kaya hindi binibigyan ng diin ang pangyayari na mayroong mga bansa na malalakas na sinasakop ang kapwa nila bansa, yung maliliit. Sa buong mundo, ganyan eh. Bakit kaya?
Dates, pero hindi yung reasons behind the events. Parang ganon.
Hindi yung sinasabi. Sa
yung
basta didiscover tayo, civilize tayo. Hindi sinasabi yung talagang nasa likod ng dahilan.
Okay. Bakit daw po petsa? Bakit po yung pangyayari? Pero hindi yung posibleng dahilan. Let's start with the professor this time. Ako si Mang Maning.
Nakatali po kasi ang kasaysayan natin sa kasaysayang kolonyal. Dahil ang mahalaga sa kasaysayan natin ay kung ano ang ginawa ng mga banyaga sa Pilipinas. At ito yung magiging resulta ng periodization mo in Philippine history. So meron kang pagdating ng Espanyol, pagdating ng Amerikano, pagdating ng Hapon, no? Tapos we have post-colonial. Ito yung 1946 onwards. Ang problema po, pag nakatali tayo sa colonial history, ang binibigyan ng emphasis ay activities ng mga foreigners sa Pilipinas. So sino yung first na Governor General, ano mga patakaran nila dito, nawawala po yung kwento ng Filipino At sa halip na kwento ng Filipino sa Pilipinas, ay kwento ng mga banyaga sa Pilipinas. Kaya maraming mga estudyante ang nawawala ng gana at yung colonial mentality ay dala-dala. Biruin mo 3 beses kang nasakop. Nasakop ka ng Espanyol, nasakop ka ng Amerikano, nasakop ka ng Hapon. Yung bata ay lumalaki sa isang perspective at isang mentality na okay lang palang magpasakop. Na okay pala na sakupin ka dahil mas powerful sa'yo yung mga bansang sumakop sa'yo. At kapag ganito yung mentality, nawawala ng dignidad, nawawala ng lakas ng loob yung bata kasi hindi niya makita na pwede siyang maging dakila. So, ang resulta, hindi natin nai-inculcate sa kanila na nakipaglaban yung mga Filipino para sa kalayaan, tapos ikukwento mo, natalo din. So, you break their hearts, no? Sinisira mo yung loob to the point na hindi nila nakikita yung esensya bakit kailangan aralin ang kasaysayan.
Mang Maning.
Tama si Professor Reyes. Ang mundo, during the time of colonization, dadalawa lang klaseng bayan. Mayroong colonial master, colonialist, at mayroong colony. Yun ang kagaya din ng slavery sa South ng Amerika. Mayroong slave master, mayroong slave. Yung slave ay mahirap. Yung slave master, mayaman yan. Kung ang kayamanan ng slave master sa American South ng araw, nabibilang yon sa number of slaves na nasa kanya. Kung may 1,000 slaves, pakayaman niya. 5 slaves lang, mahirap na colonial master yan. Ganyan din yung mga sabayan before before World War II, bago nagkaroon ng so-called decolonization. Ang pinakamaraming colonies ng araw, Britain. Yun ang pinakamarami, kaya yun ang pinakamayaman. Ngayon, nung nagkaroon ng World War II, nagkaroon ng decolonization, nawala yung mga colonies ng Britain, ngayon, mahirap na yung Britain. Kaya ang tanong natin, kung tayo ay malaya, bakit tayo mahirap? Kaya lang sa world history, ang nangyari, yung mga former colonial countries, kagaya ng Malaysia, Singapore, South Korea, China, sa may colony ng araw yon, nung nagkaroon sila ng kalayaan, nagkaroon sila ng progreso.
Okay.
Kasi nagagamit nila yung kanilang resources para sa sarili nila.
Parang meron ako nakitang katotohanan doon sa sinabi niya, yung slave master at yung slaves. Parang naalala ko yung mga agencies ngayon na may mga empleyado, na yung agencies nakikipagkontrata doon sa mga malalaking mall. At hanggang ngayon, alipin at nasa kontrata pa rin yung mga kawani. Parang yun pa rin ang nangyayari ngayon. Yes, please.
Hindi, interpretasyon lang naman ng gusto ko magkaroon ng malinawan ng konti yung nasa isip ko eh. Si Andres Bonifacio at saka yung kapatid. Sila ba yung kauna-unahang taga Maynila na nabiktima ng salvage sa Cavite?
Parang naman tinatanong mo anong origin, bakit may balisong ang Batanggen yung nagtitinda ng kumot na dumadaan sa Cavite? Parang gano'n, no?
Parang salvage eh. Dahil hanggang ngayon, hindi pa natin alam kung nasaan ba talaga si Andres Bonifacio at yung kanyang kapatid, ano?
Ang alam ko dyan, di ba may Malolos Congress, ano? Pumayag si Bonifacio na magkaroon ng Congress doon. Borgis yung karamihan doon. Talo siya. President hanggang saan. Nagrebelde si Bonifacio. You cannot rebel within your own group. You become a traitor. What does a traitor deserve? Death.
Merong pro-American, may pro-Chinese eh. Hindi kaya si Rizal doon anti-Castilla. Pro-American naman siya.
Kasi yun po yung madalas problema sa mindset. Laging may banyaga nakasama sa picture. Ano ka ba? Pro-American ka ba o pro-Japanese? Bakit sila yung kwento? Bakit sila yung mahalaga? Bakit hindi ba mahalaga yung Filipino? At sabihin mong sa halip na ikaw ay pro-American or pro-Japanese, mas interest ng Pilipino yung panghahawakan.
Kasi
Gusto ko lang i-correct yung impression na si Rizal ay naging pro-American. Kasi nung pumunta siya sa Amerika, dumaan siya sa San Francisco, sumakay siya ng train papunta New York. Papunta siya doon sa England at that time. Sumakay siya ng barko galing dito. Mga 1850s o 1888 something. Sumulat siya ng sulat sa kanyang mga kamag-anak. Dinescribe niya yung buhay doon sa United States. Ang sinabi niya, ang US, hindi naman totoo na mayroon equality doon eh. Kasi yung mga negro, nakikita niya, inaalipin ng mga Amerikano, second-class citizens. Pangalawa, may discrimination sila sa inchik. Dumating sila sa San Francisco, sa barko, at ang ginawa ng mga Amerikano, yung mga Chinese immigrants doon, inano nila,
Segregated rin. Segregated.
sinegregate nila. And ang claim nila, may sakit daw. Pero sa mga puti at saka mga other Asians, they were allowed to get out of the ship.
Uh-huh.
So, nakita na ni Rizal na malaki ang discrimination sa US. At saka, doon sa kanyang essay about the Philippine century hence, sinabi niya, darating ang Amerika. Bakit? Kasi sabi niya, imperialism is a disease that is contracted by other nations. And the United States is starting to contract the disease of imperialism, Spaniolism. Kaya sabi niya, ang Amerika darating dito, kaya lang makakalaban niya yung mga Germans at saka mga British na mga colonialist din.
Okay.
So, si Rizal, nakikita niya ang katotohanan ng karakter ng Amerikano.
Mang Maning, kung si Rizal kaya ay buhay ngayon at sasakay sa MRT-3, ano kayang isusulat niya sa kanyang mga kamag-anak? Sa MRT-3, pipila ron sa SM North EDSA, sasakay ng train patungong Makati.
Okay lang sa kanya kung ang Filipino ang may-ari niyan. Kung ang may-ari niyan mga dayuhan, hindi pwede yan. Dahil nabayan natin ito eh. Dapat ang ating transportasyon at ating mga basic industries at ating basic economic activities magiging Pilipino para makontrolan natin ang ating future. Ang nakikita natin ng profits dito napupunta sa Filipinos, hindi sa mga dayuhan. Yung ang magugustuhan ni Rizal. Excuse me, I just want to follow this up. This is important because that is what he said in the La Liga Filipina. Yung La Liga Filipina, which he brought up 2 days before he was arrested by the Spaniards, was actually a manifesto for independence. Gusto niya economic independence doon. Magkaroon ng collectivism mga Pilipino na sila mismo ay magtatayo nun sa kanilang industries. At sinabi niya doon sa industry, magiging mechanized at modernized. Hindi lang agricultural, but mechanized and industrialized. So, ang Inchik, mga Espanyol, nakita nila na ito separatist document dito Sinasabi ng mga Pilipino gagawa ng self-protection na coalition, organization. Kaya masama ito. Kinulong siya in-exile siya after 2 days.
Okay. Frank?
I beg to disagree dun sa ang tingin ko kay Rizal ay hindi siya nationalist, internationalist siya. Ang Ateneo hindi nagtuturo ng love of country yan. Love of man. Love of man. Mas magaling. Kaya ako UP, believe ako sa Ateneo.
Ganun, ha? Yung ibang graduate ng Ateneo, believe ka? Yung iba, wala ko sinabing...
Yung iba. By the way, I said, hindi nationalist si Rizal. Look at his poem nung bata siya. Yung sa aking mga kabata. Hindi to sa akin, this is my interpretation, hindi Tagalog ang ibig sabihin ni Rizal doon sa aking mga kabata. Hindi niya dinidiyos, hindi ibig sabihin ay Tagalog ang kanyang minamahal doon. Kundi, Freedom. Freedom. Kalayaan. Kasi meron akong logic dyan. You just read it.
Okay. We will do that. Please.
Tracy Cabrera po. Background lang po, short background. Sa nakikita ko po yung mga progressive countries, from my perception, sila, they have a sense of history. Australia has preserved some of its historical evidences, everything historical na pinipreserve nila. Even in the US, even in Japan. And history and culture are interlocked. So, tayo, kasi parang umiibig ka sa isang babae. Pag mahal mo ang tunay ang isang babae, gagawin mo ang lahat para sa kanya. So, how can you relate? Can you please relate? Kasi sabi ni Professor Reyes, may systemic problem ang ating educational system, which I believe totoo. Kasi our history has been written by our conquerors, not by Filipinos. So how can we have a sense of love and patriotism for our country when we really do not know what our country is?
Okay. Tracy, dagdagan ko yung idea, no, yung tanong mo. Pero hindi pa kaya sapat sa iyo na pinipreserve yung naiyawan hanggang ngayon? May sense of history yun eh. Soon it will be declared as heritage site. Oh, what more can you ask? Anyway, tanong. Yung pong tanong ni Tracy, sino po magbo-volunteer sumagot?
Yung tanong mo?
That was it.
Hindi, sabi
Yung
kasi
sense of history.
Sabi kasi ni...
No, gusto ko lang maliwanagan.
Sabi ni Mang Maning, di ba, mahirap tayo. Kasi mahirap tayo, di ba? Lahat ng progressive countries, makikita mo, mahal nila yung kanilang bayan. Makikita mo, proven by, nakita mo naman US, meron silang museums, preserved. Pati yung monitor nung araw, yung first ironclad ship, preserved. Pati yung unang-unang tren, preserved. Samantalang tayo, wala tayong preserve. Ang preserve nandun sa Ilocos, meron doon na preserve.
Baka kasi wala tayong nationalism eh. Wala tayong sense of nationalism. Ang katotohanan, tayo westernized. At yung sinasabi mo nga, colonial mentality. Ang author ng colonial mentality si Don Claro Recto. Kasi ang pag-iisip ng Filipino ngayon, sumusunod sa media. Karamihan ng media sumusunod din sa Amerikano. Sa edukasyon natin, ganyan din ang edukasyon natin. Dating back from the American public school system. Kaya yung colonial mentality nagiging widespread. Hindi sa atin importante yung museum eh. Hindi sa atin importante yung history, yung tunay na history ng Pilipinas. Ang importante sa atin yung entertainment, yung mga US, yung movies, ganyan. Kaya baliwala na yung museum.
Oh, yes please.
Gagamitin ko yung isang konsepto ni Dr. Salazar. Meron kasi siyang konsepto na pantayong pananaw. Sa tingin ko, ito yung wala tayo bilang isang bansa. Wala tayong pantayong pananaw. Wala tayong konsepto na kung ano yung nasa loob. Sa halip tinitingnan natin ano yung kanya, ano yung sa kanya-kanya, kami-kami, no? Sila-sila. Pero kapag hindi ka kasama kasi sa loob, wala kang pakialam. At kapag hindi ka nasa loob, hindi ka kikilos. So, ang tingin natin sa Pilipinas, object, nasa labas yung mga Pilipino, pati yung term silang mga Pilipino, as if yung nagsasalita ay hindi Filipino. Dapat ang term mo ay kaming mga Pilipino. Kasi kasama ka doon sa storya. Pero ano sinasabi? Ay, yung mga Pilipino, kaya hindi sila umunlad, look who's talking. Yung nagsasalita ay Pilipino din. So hindi niya nakikita yung sarili niya doon sa loob ng grupo na binabatikos niya. Pero pag nakita niya yung sarili niya sa loob, sa halip na magbatikos, ang kanyang ibibigay ay mungkahi at suwestyon. Kasi mahalaga sa kanya kung ano yung development mula sa loob. Pantayong pananaw.
Follow up lang. I consider that as a concroid. Now, what is the academe Kasi alam niyo naman na talagang maling-mali ang ating kasaysayan, history. Maraming mga bagay na dapat features or details about history na kailangan sana napapag-aralan, nalalaman ng mga kabataan. That is why may kumakantang ang bata na sa dalagat buntot, hindi yung sa lupang hinirang. So, what I'm saying is, anong ginagawa ng academe to correct our history?
Yun ang malungkot sa atin, Tracy. Yung education system natin, bagong-bago lang na policy nila, tinanggal nila yung history as a subject matter in our educational system. Sa elementary at saka sa high school. Yun ang pinakamasama na nangyari sa ating educational system. Bakit nila ginawa yun? Parang mawala ang ating memory sa ating bansa. Alam mo, pag ang individual nawala ng memory, nagiging gago siya eh. Nagiging idiot siya eh. Ganyan ba ang gusto nila mangyari sa bayan natin? Na nakakalimutan natin ang history. Kaya tayo magiging parang baliw. Yan ang nangyayari.
Okay, well said. Attorney Trillana, would you care to react to the points raised by Tracy about sense of nationalism?
One of the things that he said about nationalism, bakit na hindi tayo nagpipreserve ng things that are really native to us? Yung talagang ating-atin. Kung mapapansin po ninyo, ganun na ang ginagawa little by little sa Pilipinas. If you notice, at hindi nakikita ng marami po yan, ano? The rice terraces. The rice terraces, if you must look at the rice terraces, is one of the greatest wonders of the world. To my mind, it's greater than that of the pyramids. Why? The pyramid was actually built for the dead. What was the rice terraces done by the Filipinos? Even before the Spaniards came. The rice terraces were built by our natives, our people, with their own hands, bringing together big boulders so that they can build terraces that will have rice for them. It was not built for the dead. It was built for the living. And that is why we have the rice terraces until now. Beautiful for the country. And this is coming out. Not only the rice terraces. Not only the rice terraces. If you look, yung sinasabi nga ni Professor kanina, or I think you were also saying something, we are so foreign-oriented. I'll just give you an example. We are so foreign-oriented, ano po ang nalalaman ninyo sa beginning ng man and woman? Anong history? Anong story? Hindi ba ang story is the story of the Bible? Ano story ng the Bible? God created man. From his ribs, he took another one and created the woman. What does it mean? Even the Bible said, the woman must be submissive to the man. Sa Pilipino, what is the story of creation in the Philippines? And what is malakas and maganda? Pareho. When it was created, in that creation, yung ating kawayan. And who came? And equal. Man and woman. Not one coming from the other. Which one is the greater story of creation? Isn't that the Filipino? I asked this among young people. And they told me when they realized it, ang Filipino po talagang hindi lamang natin nalalaman, hindi natin napapag-aralan the native traditions and beauty and spirit of our country. Learn about it. Because ang sabi ko sa inyo kanina when I began, the way to be is, and the way to do is to be. What does it mean? I related it, ma'am, yung sinabi mo kanina, yung water, it vaporizes. But a vapor is still a form of water. So it's still the same. So what does Rizal want? He wants something beyond water. Will my faith be like that of water, never to be lost into nothingness? In other words, he was saying, gusto ko sana ako'y magkatulad hindi lamang ng isang tubig. And what is that? More than water. And where does it come first? Sa sarili po. First, na sinabi kong 4 quadrants, The first one is the individual internal. Doon po tayo, I think, is the source of all our debate. If you first go into your internal and you change your internal, the world will be better because your internal will be better and the world will be a place we can live in.
Thank you. Linggoy.
Magandang maga po. Ako po si Linggoy ng Opinion. Naniniwala po ako sa kasaysayan na mayroong mga historical cycles. At sa ngayon, meaning to say the second half of the 1900s and the beginning of the 2000s, naniniwala ko na itong cycle ay mga average of 15 years. Kaya po, merong EDSA 1, 86, may EDSA 2, 2001. So, 15 years. No? Tapos meron pang ibang mga cycle. Halimbawa, yung peak ng PKP, HMB, 1950, until yung revival sa CPP-NPA about 15 years later by Joma. Okay. Sa kasaysayan natin before the 1900s, meron po bang mga cycle, especially sa mga pag-aalsa o sa mga pagkikilos na mga malawakan, yung mga mass movement?
May cycle din po ba? Ganon. Yun ang tanong, ano po?
Ay, ang tanong ko, kung ako naniwala na ngayon may cycle,
Ah.
pwede ako mag-lecture ng 1 oras tungkol dito sa mga cycle ngayon.
Next time.
Pero, ang tanong ko, noon, meron ba mga cycle between pag-aalsa at yung paglalaki ng mga mass movement?
Ayun. Mas maganda yan for next week, but sagutin nyo na, Atty. Trillana, tapos si Mang Maning.
Sir, let me just expand on that cycle. The cycle is longer than that, than 50 years or even 100 years. So let me give you some cycles. The first cycle, if you just go on, this is most West-oriented because wala tayong nakikitang ganun sa atin. But Western, kuwan lang po, hindi natin sasabing tama kayo. Sinasabi ko lang ang sinasabi nila because they make cycles also. What was the first cycle? Kukuha nilang pa natin. The golden age of Greece and Rome. That was a cycle. And that took how many years? Centuries. Not 50 years. Not 25 years. After the golden age was the fall of Rome. The fall of Rome comes the Dark Ages, the Middle Ages. How many centuries po yun? 13 centuries. Before they went into the Enlightenment in the 13th and 14th century. Then, Enlightenment went into, later on, it went into yung kanilang, yung sa mga, the scientists. Yung sila Newton na.
Renaissance.
Yun na. 18th, 17th, 18th, 19th century na. That was already the age of science. And we are there in the age of science. At part of that is the part of the industrial age. We are at the very end of the industrial age according to this cycle. We are beginning into the IT age, a new age, because you're talking of cycles. We are now in that transition. According to Rizal, please forgive me, look again at what he said. He said, you will go through the struggles. We went through the struggles. How many countries actually colonized us? At least 3. But in all those times of colonization, there was no decade where we did not rise up to gain our freedom. Sabi niya, tingnan ninyo. Tamblot. Unang-una po yan sila tamblot. Pangalawa, napakalaking malaki, hindi pangalawa. One of them is of course the Gohoy. 84 years more or less. Short-lived or long-lived, we always fought for the freedom and independence we had before the Spaniards came, even before the first conquest and the second conquest. So, yan pong cycle na yan sinasabi ni Rizal. You go through those struggles because the struggles will help you for the future that will come to you when Las Filipinas dentro de 100 años comes. When that comes, be ready. And what does he say? Recover your good old qualities and then remember your past. And this is what you're doing. We are remembering the past. Except that we should remember it in a nice way. Sabi nila, wala daw tayong history na tayo lamang. I think that may be correct, but not in the last 50 years. Look at the history written by Ray Ileto. Ray Ileto, sorry, taga saan ba si Ray Ileto? Taga Ateneo ba yun or UP? For the first time, namangha po ang mga historians, even sila Agoncillo, because Passion and Revolution actually looked at a revolution from the bottom. From our point of view, not from the point of view of the Spaniards. No. From our point, and what was the point of view? Our revolution was a spiritual revolution. Ano ang sabi ni Bonifacio? Ang sabi ni Bonifacio, isulong-isulong ang puri at kabanalan. What was that? Essentially spiritual. Ano ang sabi ni Rizal? Only love can work wonders, only virtue can redeem. Redemption presupposes virtue. Virtue can redeem this country. Ano yan? Spiritual. Si Mabini, ano sabi niya? I have always loved this country, but it should be marked by virtue. Ano yan? Spiritual. So, where are we? Let us not anymore say, hindi pa natin nagagawa yan. May gumagawa na po sa atin. Do you know what Dapitan was? Dapitan was 1892, 1896 na si Rizal doon. Exiled in Dapitan. If you read Dapitan, you will be able to see what he did as a microcosm of how to develop a country when it is in the hands of people who love the country. Yung sinasabi nila Mayo. Look at what he did. Everything that we are going to do now, he did there. Not a politician, but in politics. He was not a politician, but he was in politics. You cannot divorce yourself from politics. But you must have Rizal as an example. Because pag nakita po niya, lahat ng ating departments ng ating gobyerno, ginawa po niya yan, including the first na cooperative. Siya ang gumawa ng first cooperative doon. In Dapitan itself. Hindi lang po niyo alam, Sindangan Bay. Ang unang puntahan niya is Sandakan in North Borneo. Hindi siya binigyan ng pagkakataon. Nagpunta siya sa Dapitan. Anong nakita niya doon? Sindangan Bay. That was a beautiful bay, very much like our Subic Bay. And he had that in mind. Kung magkaroon siya ng pagkakataon, he wanted to develop that into a hub into the future. This is Rizal. This is the Philippines. This is you. This is me. So, this is what we must do.
Kayo ha, pag nabuhay si Rizal, hahatawin tayong lahat noon. Go ahead.
Good morning to everyone. I'm Jerry Kibilan, freelance. I admire very much the speech, the talk of Atty. Trillana. He reminds me of several things. It's about independence, and so is the thought of Mang Maning and Frank Hilario about nationalism and internationalism. Atty. Trillana mentioned about industrial revolution. This is quite a little long. I was there in Iron Bridge, where the first cast iron was forged. Beautiful place. I was at Sindangan last year. I'll be there again this weekend with General Llano. And the Polog and the Dakak Beach and the Pitan. There's even a Kalambay Street there. Okay. But the thing is, going at internationalism and nationalism, I agree with both. I'd like us that where will the twain meet? Next year it will be AEC. We are now going into internationalism. Because I am an international manager for a big corporation before. I know what it is to be nationalistic and to be international. Every time I travel, I use my barong. If I can take the weather, I use my barong. Okay? But then I deal with people all over for my local business. So where will the twain meet when both can merge together for the total happiness of mankind, for economic prosperity? My advocacy is peace, prosperity, unity, and love. A lot of people are laughing about my advocacy, but I still stick to it because of that spirit that Atty. Trillana was mentioning. So anybody of you can answer my question about when will the twain meet? When will Frank and Mang Maning agree to a certain point, for instance.
Maganda ito. Thank you Thank you for your insights. Parang hindi yun yata pag magagaling ang tao, hindi magkasundo. Ano? Pag sobrang tatalino, hindi magkasundo. Pero pag medyo bobo, hindi rin dahil hindi maunawaan. Professor.
Dahil ako po yung nasa gitna, baka ako yata yung sasagot, no? Nationalism and internationalism, two different concepts. But if there's one thing that we could learn from these two concepts, both of them have their own interests. Siguro po ang tanong ay, kanino po bang interest yung isinusulong natin? Kasi I do believe there are countries helping the country right now. No? May mga aid sila na ibinibigay. But they have their own personal interests as well. Tumutulong sila sa bansa kasi meron silang gustong makuha sa atin. Pero yung idea na ang Pilipino, pag tinulungan niya yung kapwa Pilipino, ang interest niya ay para sa kabutihan ng mga Filipino din. Isang pwedeng maikling kwento. No? Sa mga reunions, ang madalas na ini-invite ay yung mga doktor na nag-abroad at doon naglingkod sa ibang bansa. Pero hindi in-invite yung mga Pilipino na nagstay sa Pilipinas at nagtayo ng sariling kumpanya, nagpakain ng 100 pamilya at tinulungan yung bansa. So yun yung sinasabi kanina ni Sir, no, na ang konsepto natin foreign-oriented, laging labas ang tinitignan natin. Ano ang nasa labas? Pero yung tanong kung internationalism ba or nationalism, ang tanong, ano ba ito mula sa loob mo? Sino bang may benefit at sino ang makikinabang? Ang sagot ko lagi, dapat ay Pilipino ang makinabang. Dapat ang unuunang interest lagi ay yung interest ng kababayan natin sa halip na interest ng mga dayuhan.
Okay. Yes, Mang Maning.
Yung internationalism at saka nationalism, they are not opposite. They are actually complementary. Filipinos live in a world where there are so many nations. So we must learn from others. Kaya isipin natin yung, ibigay ko yung example yung Japan. Yung Japan used to be a country that was isolated. Tapos pumunta si Commodore Perry doon, nagdala ng modern ships na malalaking kanyon. Sinabi niya doon sa mga Hapon, kung di kayo mag-open up ng economy, bubumbahin kayo. Tiningnan ng mga Hapon, rulers, yung barko ng Amerikano, steel ships, at saka ang haba ng kanyon. Sa kanila, kwan lang, paraw, wooden ships. So, hindi makalaban. Sabi nila, hindi natin kaya ito. So, pumayag sila magkaroon ng treaty to open up some ports in Yokohama for trading with the Americans. Pero sabi nila, pag hindi tayo gumawa ng paraan, magiging colony tayo ng Amerikano. Kagaya ng Pilipinas, kagaya ng Indonesia under the Dutch, kagaya ng Indochina under France. So, kailangan gumawa tayo ng paraan. Anong ginawa nila? Padala sila ng mga scholars, mga observers sa London, sa Germany.
Tapos pagbalik, yun ang
France.
pinakinabangan.
Ha?
Pagbalik, yun ang pinakinabangan.
Pinag-aralan nila. Pagkatapos, ginaya nila yan. Including, not only the industries, how to build ships, how to build factories, how to build machines. They did not only learn about that. They learned about the political structure. Kaya in-adapt nila yung democracy, yung parliament. So, ang ibig ko sabihin, Pilipinas, ngayon, mahirap tayo. Naghihirap ang 90% of our people. Lumabas lang sa poll survey ng SWS na 90% ng Filipinos nangangailangan ng pera during this year. 90%. Ang hindi pa lang na nangangailangan yung 10% sa OFWs abroad at saka yung 0.1% na nandito sa Taguig at saka sa Makati.
Mang Maning.
So, yun ang problema natin.
Mang Maning.
So, we follow what the others have done.
So,
Malaysia, Singapore. We follow them.
Para naman sinabi mong dito, mamatay namin pera, wala magsasabing, wag naman. Dahil 90% ka mo, walang pera.
Pero hindi nila sinishare. Kung sinishare nila, wag sana sila mamatay.
Okay. Well said. Thank you. Yes, Frank.
Dadagdagan ko lang yung internationalism. Sa palagay ko, if Jose Rizal is alive today, we're alive today. He will choose English, not Tagalog. Bakit? Language, English is the comparative advantage of the Filipino. Tinalo na natin yung India. We are the #1 call center in the Philippines. We have 600,000 in the Philippines. At saka si Rizal, bakit hindi siya sumulat na, bakit Spanish yung Noli and Fili? Bakit Spanish yung kanyang valedictory address? Poem. Because he knows that he should write for his target readers. Sino ba ang target reader audience mo ngayon sa sa bansa o sa buong mundo? Yung mga marunong ng English.
Okay? Sir. Yes, Professor.
I beg to disagree with that.
Ito na kami. Sige,
For,
go ahead.
para lang for the record, no, Rizal was not after any foreign language to be our language. He was after for our own language to be our
I
language.
will not say that he wanted it for us as our language.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
but he just wanted for maximum exposure. Ganun.
Kasi sa ideya po ni Rizal, ang wika ang pag-iisip ng bayan. Malinaw ito sa El Fili nung kinwestiyon niya yung pagtatayo ng akademya ng wikang Kastila ng mga estudyante. At ginamit niya yung karakter na nasisimulan para tanungin kung ano ang mapapalaning niya pag inaral niya yung mga wikang yan.
In the novels, it is Rizal talking to another Rizal. You don't know which one.
Alam niyo mga kaibigan, itong discussion na to, kung marinig ko lang sa mga congressmen at senador to, malayo mararating ng Pilipinas. Si Professor. Okay.
Sige po, sige po.
Hindi, siguro yung una munang dumating.
Tama.
Yung una munang dumating.
Standby
Ito.
lang ako dito, standby.
Yan siya, unang dumating. Okay. Sige po.
Kung mamarapating sana, hindi lang pagtatanong, kung hindi siguro isang pagsususo. Pero bago yan, ay nais kong magpasalamat, thanks and no thanks, dun sa mama na nakasalamin doon. Sapagkat ako'y nung estudyante, ayaw na ayaw ko ng kasaysayan, katulad na sinasabi ni Professor, na ang binabanggit lang ay yung petsa, kung sino, kung saan. Never that I have read a historical book that talks about the whys and wherefores of history. Yung esensya. Kaya tama yung sabi niya, ito'y isang salaysay na merong saysay. Yung salaysay ang nawawala. Sapagkat presentation lang ng facts. Para din yung datos historiko na ginawa noong kapanahonan ng Kastila, ay nakasulat lang mga pangalan ng tao at ano mga posisyon nila. Yun yung datos historiko. So, yun na naging trend. Kaya ako interesado dun sa sinasabi, sapagkat si Atty. Trillana po, ako'y walang kahilig-hilig sa kasaysayan, siya po ang may kasalanan kung bakit binigyan ako ng ganitong sakit ng ulo na wala na akong ginawa ngayon kundi basahin. Katulad nung sinasabi yung sa wika, ay sinasabi natin, sabi raw ni Rizal, ang hindi magmahal sa sariling wika, ay mali po Ang tunay na sinabi pala ni Rizal dyan, ang hindi magmahal sa kanyang widika. Hindi yung wikang ginamit, kung ano ang kanyang sinalita. Diyan po nagkakamali. Kaya doon yung sinasabi internationalism. Hindi mahalaga yung wika Ang mahalaga yung esensya nung gusto mo sabihin. It is the message, not the medium that you use. Okay. Ngayon, hindi nga tanong, pero gusto kong magsusog. Yan ang problema sa mga media kasi, natanong natin para ilathala lang. Again, yung facts na naman. Kaya hindi matuto ang Pilipino Kasi ang alam lang natin yung petsa gano'n. Pero bakit? Yung malalim na dahilan ang wala. Yung salaysay ang wala. Ngayon, kanina binanggit na iba sa isang may akda, ibang sinasabi, another doon sa isang sinasabi.
Okay.
Maraming taon na ipinanukala ko na kung pwede magkaroon tayo ng historical convention para malikom natin ang lahat na yan at maging karoon tayo ng isang official version of Philippine history. Ako'y nagpapasalamat doon sa idea ni Atty. Trillana sometime in the early 2000 na nagkaroon tayo ng isang parang seminar workshop sa Manila Hotel na kung saan ay parang ang title ay Friendship and Betrayal, something like that. At diyan naglabasan ang maraming mga artikulo, no? Maraming mga kasulatan na ginawa ng mga mapanaliksik na mga guro, mga historian, etc. Kaya lang masakit lang ay hanggang ngayon wala akong makita sa mga national o whatever bookstore yung compilation nitong mga ito.
Napag-usapan, okay.
Katulad nung Balangiga Massacre, wala yan doon sa History of the Filipino People by Dr. Saide. And let it be known also that before Dr. Saide wrote the Philippine history book that is largely used in most schools, he was sent to the United States, meaning he was given what are the parameters. Kaya slanted. It was actually a bastardized version of Philippine history.
So you can cite him for treason, ganon. You can cite him for treason.
Hindi, ang sa akin naman, kahit paano may natuwa, pero kaya nga lang, ang nais ko sana ay masausaw ng gusto. Ang isang pinakamabigat na karanasan ko ay nang ibigay sa akin na Atty. Trillana isang aklat na sinulat ni Reynaldo, what's that? Ileto. Yung Pasyon and Revolusyon. Abe, hinahanap ko sa ibang aklat yon, yung katulad ng istorya ni Apolinario de la Cruz, ay malalim pala. Malalim.
Mm-hmm.
Dito makikita ang talino ng mga tinatawag noon na pobres y ignorantes.
Okay. Ang sinasabi po ninyo, iba yung matatalino nung araw dahil ngayon yung iba magugulang na, ganon.
Hindi lang. Ang sinasabi ko po ay sana sa pamamagitan ng mga taong naririto ngayon ay magkaroon ng isang pagsusubikap,
Okay.
na magkaroon ng isang paglalagom ng ating mga kasaysayan na pag-uusapan ng mga historiador at ng mga akademikyan.
Okay.
Ang masakit pa ngayon, yung sinasabi ni Kamani na tinanggal ang kasaysayan, elementary and high school, napakalupit dito. Sa Amerika po, ang isang bata, 3 years old, 4 years old, na tinuturuan pa ng bumasa. Ang nilalaman ng kanilang binabasa ay kasaysayan.
Okay.
At dito nyo makikita ng Amerikano, right or wrong, my country is my country. Dito hindi mangyari yan sapagkat hindi natin alam ang ating kasaysayan.
Okay. Salamat po. Alam po ninyo, yung kanyang mungkahi napakaganda. God forbid I become president, I will send you all to the concentration camp for you to concentrate. Di po ba? You'll be sent to the concentration camp to concentrate on what you're supposed to do. Tracy.
Next.
Okay. Ang ating kaibigan, sige. Go ahead.
Magandang umaga ho sa inyong lahat. I'd like to ask your statement or opinion with regards to President Quezon's famous statement, yung sinabi niya na mas mabuti pa ang bansa natin na minamanage ng mga Pilipino like hell and than the Americans like heaven. Ano ho bang ibig sabihin nito at sa mga naging leader natin katulad ni President Quezon sa kasalukuyan sitwasyon ng bansa natin?
Sino kaya unang sasagot doon? Frank, please.
Kasalanan ni Quezon itong nangyayari sa atin. I prefer a government run like hell by Filipino. That's what we have, hell.
Okay, so kasalanan ni Quezon. Professor.
I think that statement was made because he was trying to make a point na independence, regardless ano ang pupuntahan. No? Unfortunately, it happened. No? Or rather, it's happening right now. Pero yung sinasabi nga dito, yun nga po, no, ang loyalty mo dapat ay nasa Filipino. Ano man ang sino man siya sa harap mo, ano man siya ngayon, ano siya sa magiging bukas, ang loyalty mo ay sa Filipino.
Mang Maneng.
Well, we have to put that in context. Actually, sinabi ni Quezon yun, during the wood crisis, nag-resign yung cabinet, including Senator Laurel, dahil na nagkaroon ng skandalo sa Maynila tungkol sa weteng. Yung isang kapitan na Amerikano was found to be corrupt and was dismissed by the Filipino Council of Manila. Pa si General Wood, siya ang Governor General, siya ang leader ng gobyerno natin. Binaliwala yung decision ng Filipino Council, Manila Council, at ni-reinstate yung American lieutenant or sergeant who accepted wetting money. Nag-resign yung cabinet. Yun ang one of the best instances of nationalism in the history of our country. Na yung mga members of the cabinet, hindi lang dati during GMA, members magre-resign during the American occupation because the head of the government, American Governor General, rejected a decision made by the Philippine Council. So sinabi ni Rizal, I prefer a government
Si Quezon ang sabi niya.
by Filipinos
Quezon
to a
po.
government run like heaven by Americans.
Si
Ano
Quezon.
ibig niya sabihin? No American can run this country like heaven. Only the Filipinos can run this country like heaven. Because only the Filipinos can love themselves. That is what Rizal wanted. Ngayon, binabaliktad ng kanyang kalaban. Binabaliktad, ginagawang literal. Yun ay tinatawag sa English, hyperbole. Pabaliktaran.
Okay.
So, yun ang reason. It was a statement of confidence in the capacity of the Filipino to rule themselves. Kaya Independence Day, wag natin makalimutan yung sinabi ni Quezon.
Mang Maning, so ang problema nun, waiting. Hanggang ngayon may waiting pa naman, pero wala nagre-resign.
So, ang ibig kong sabihin ito pala, Kamaning, kung babalik ko tayo doon sa biblical story, everything comes from the Word. Kung ano yung sinasabi mo, nangyayari po. So, siguro ang lesson dito, even in our leaders, kasi it's the failure of the leaders, of the elite, that runs and manage this country.
Take in concept. Kung ako nagmura ngayon, iisipin kong, bakit ako nagmura? O sino mumura? Yung ba, nung nagmumura ako, tumatawa ba ako? O I really mean it? Putang na mo.
Easy. Okay.
Tumatawa ka, hindi natin you don't mean it.
Alright.
So, it's not just the expression.
Pero si Quezon po noon,
Tinatanggal nila sa konsepto eh.
seryoso po si Quezon nung sabihin niya yan kasi nagtatalumpati siya sa bayan.
Sabihin, it's within concept, ang sinasabi niya, dapat ang Filipino ang magpapatakbo sa sarili nilang bayan kasi walang ibang dayuhan makakagawa niyan.
Okay.
Kahit na hell, basta Filipino. Ako, I agree with that. Kasi pag ang Filipino, tunay na Filipino, ang magpatakbo ng Pilipinas, hindi pwedeng hindi tayo magtatagumpay.
Yun po kasi sir, yung sinasabi niya na we should take everything into their proper context. Doon sa panahon kung kailan nasabi, this is historical thinking. Huwag mong tanggalin sa aquarium yung isda kasi mamamali ka ng interpretasyon. So, kailangan kung kailan niya sinabi, paano niya sinabi, bakit niya sinabi. At yung 1923 crisis, cabinet crisis, it's one of the events in Philippine history na dapat ay binabalik-balikan din natin.
Mayroon lang akong rejoinder doon. So, bawal yung think out of the box.
Ngayon, ang sistema po.
Salamat po. Thank you very much.
Alright, napakaganda niyan. Kapabling, may dadagdag kayo doon sa issue kay Quezon. Hindi na. Okay, wala na. Maliwanag na. Okay? We have time for 1 or 2 questions.
Good morning po. Juvie from DWBL. Naano ko lang po, kasi nakatanggap po ako na mensahe. Pasensya na, Sir Melo, kasi late po ako. But then, napaka-importante po ito na marinig ko yung inyong mga sinasabi kanina, pero na-late pa rin ako. Anyway, ang akin lang po, nung kasing araw, nung hindi ko makakalimutan to, laging sinasabi ng teacher ko, always remember that pen is mightier than the sword. Ngayon po ba dito sa ating kasalukuyang nangyayari sa ating gobyerno, napaka-importante ho sa akin ay pen talaga. Kasi nung nasa abroad po ako, lagi kong nililift ang ating bansang Pilipinas, which is hindi naman ginagawa ng iba. Kasi ang nararanasan ko sa sarili kong nakikita, yung kapwa Pilipino ko ay siyang yumuyurak sa sarili nating bansa. So, iiyak ako minsan, naguguluhan ako kasi tumutulong ako dun sa OWA nung araw na ako'y nasa abroad para hikayatin yung mga Pilipino na magsumbong sa kapwa Pilipino, hindi sa ibang nasyon. Dahil unang-una, hindi nila alam yung tunay na damdamin natin mga Pilipino. Sa inyo pong palagay, anybody can answer me. Nangyayari pa ho ba itong kasabihan na to, na pen is mightier than the sword? At itong mga kasamahan natin, yung iba nating mga kababayan, bakit kailangan nilang hikayating manggulo yung ating kapwa Pilipino na ang ginugulo ay Pilipino rin, which is mali, di ba? Dapat ayusin natin yung ating bakuran bago tayo mag-ayos ng bakuran ng iba. Yun lang po.
Liwanagin ko po sa mga panauhin. Wala pong typographical error yun pag sinulat, ha? The pen is mightier than the sword.
Yes.
Hindi niyo pwede pagdikitin yung dalawang letra doon, dalawang kataga. Delikado yan. Okay.
Thank you,
Sige,
Sir Melo.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Ano ba yan? Nakalimutan ko tuloy eh. Ginamit ko din minsan yun eh. Ginawa kong slogan yun eh.
Sige, sir.
Sa isang article ko, yun ang umpisa eh. Anyway. Yeah.
Nangyayari pa ba yun ngayon?
Ang kuhan ko dyan, maliit lang yung percentage na ginugulo ng Pilipino, ang kapwa Pilipino. Ang mas mabigat, it's the system, stupid.
Okay. It's the system. Okay. All right. You can have the best pen in the world, but if your editor will not allow you to use the story, may problema tayo dyan. Okay? Liwanag yan. Okay? Sige.
Last question. Puro historian po kayo, no? I'm Pat Santos from Tribune. My question is, sa hinaba ng panahon, sa inyo ba, mula noon hanggang ngayon, yung present times, whom do you consider yung karapat-dapat na national hero between the two, Bonifacio or Rizal?
Walang kamatayan to. Kailan ba sisikat ang araw? Sige, simulan na natin.
Pinag-aaway yung apat.
Sige, masaya to. Oh, Mang Maning. Sige lang, okay lang, walang problema. Sige, Mang Maning. Sige. May tanong ka pa rin.
Parang related sa Kalayaan yan na mahaba nga yan. Mas mahaba sa balbas ko. Pero yun nga lang, maganda inyong topic. May kasaysayan ba ang kasaysayan? May kalayaan ba ang kalayaan? Now, para tayong umiikot, business cycle. Pero sa inyong mga expertise, sa paikot-ikot ng problema, saan ba pwedeng magsimula? Para ma-identify natin paanong direction. Kasi miikot, walang di natin alam ang direction. Hindi rin natin alam ang starting point. Now, the shortest way from the starting point to the goal or objective is straight line. Ano ang straight line na pwede nyo i-propose?
Maganda to. O sige, dun muna sa unang tanong bago yung pangalawa. Mang Maning, sino doon sa dalawa?
Mayroon akong sinulat sa
Yung mikropono po.
Mayroon akong sinulat sa Inquirer 2 years ago, I think, during Rizal Day. Sinabi ko, hindi dapat pag-awayin natin mga heroes. Lahat sila pantay-pantay. So, lalo na si Rizal at saka si Bonifacio. Si Bonifacio, kinikilala rin si Rizal na siya ang kanyang nagumpisa ng kanyang pag-iisip na magkaroon tayo ng independence. Kasi naging member siya ng La Liga Filipina, nandoon siya nung inorganize ni Rizal ang La Liga Filipina, which was actually, in my opinion, a document for the separation of the Philippines from Spain. So, huwag natin pag-awayan yun. Lahat sila may kanya-kanyang role. Kanya-kanya. Sa buhay, kanya-kanyang role tayo. May parent, may anak, may teacher, may lawyer, may historian, may media. We are all equal. So, there's no need to answer that question. Pag tinatanong natin, pinag-aaway natin yung heroes natin, may behind yan eh. May nagsasabi na si Rizal, kasi sabi nila si Rizal pacifist. Ayaw naman, may iba naman na nagsasabi, ayaw nila si Bonifacio kasi violent. But actually, they have the same aim, which is the independence of the country. And in a sense, both of them agreed. Now, if there are no more means to achieve our independence by just asking for reforms from Spain, at hindi binibigyan ng Spain, the only recourse is violence. Yun ang sinabi ni Rizal at yun ang sinabi ni Bonifacio na binasa yung mga sinulat ni Rizal. So wag natin pag-awayan yan.
Okay. Frank.
I disagree na pabor si Rizal sa revolution. In previous years, he was for revolution, but Ferdinand Blumentritt warned him, you're going to waste blood. Do you want that on your conscience? And you have to have a likelihood of success. There are 4 factors for a revolution. None existed. Sabi ni Rizal, Bao.
Okay. Professor.
Ang debating pong yan ay produkto ng historical context ng 60s, lalo na't may tunggalian sa pagitan ng mga makakaliwa, no? At mga revolusyonaryong grupo laban sa gobyerno. So, isa sa may dahilan po nito, mga historians din po ang nag-create ng debate. When in fact, yung debate po na to ay non-existent na dapat kasi kagaya ng binabanggit ni Sir, hindi po talaga sila dapat pag-awayin. Dahil kasama sila sa parehong henerasyon na mayroong may kaibang paraan ng pagsusulong ng kanilang agenda. So yung debate sa dalawa ay may agenda po ito para isulong si Bonifacio na mas radikal dapat ang pamamaraan ng pakikibaka at yun nga, yung sistema na mas madugo dapat ang pagkuha ng mga pagbabago.
Melo, gusto ko lang sagutin yung sinabi niya na yung pag-iisip ni Bonifacio at ni Rizal magkaiba. Hindi man magkaiba eh. Kaya bakit si Bonifacio nagtayo ng katipunan at lumaban para sa kalayaan? Kasi binasa niya si Rizal eh. Hindi ba sinabi niya na binasa niya ang El Filibusterismo at No Limitangere? At doon na nakita niya, ngayon, nakita niya yung kailangan na magbago ang Pilipinas, magkaroon ng kalayaan. Pagkatapos na nag-attend siya ng organization of the La Liga Filipina, in-exile si Rizal. As a result of which, hindi siya nagkaroon siya ng conclusion na ang solusyon lang ay gera o revolution. Bago siya nag-revolution, pinadala niya si Dr. Valenzuela sa Dapitan. Parang sabihin kay Rizal na tayo maghihimagsikan na hindi natin ma-stop na yan. Sabi ni Rizal, totoo ba yan? Di yung mga sinulat ko tumatama, nagkakaroon ng result, sabi niya. So the seed grows. Yun ang sinabi niya. Yun ang sinabi ni Valenzuela. Tuwan-tuwa daw si Rizal nung nalaman niya magkakaroon ng magsikan.
Okay.
Kaya hindi totoo yun na hindi sila nakakasundo.
Announcement lang, next time, our guests, pwede ho, pag nandito kayo, paki-silent naman nung silent mode ng cellphone nyo, nakaka-distract eh.
Okay. Yung last question, where do we start? Where are we headed? Ano ba talaga? Simulan natin kay Mang Maning, papunta rito. Yan. Yung mikropono po.
Karamihan tayo, journalists. Kaya sa atin, ang kalayaan ay instrumental. Ako matagal na journalist, 50 years, siguro 60 years, naging editor ako. Kung ako yung nag-e-edit ng mga news items, tinitingnan mo kung maliwanag. Kung minsan hindi maliwanag kasi walang background. Hindi nire-recall yung nangyari before. Kaya yung reader, hindi niya naiintindihan kung yung data ang sasabihin mo. Dadagdagan mo ngayon ng background. Ang history ay background natin. Ang problema ng bayan natin ay kahirapan. Bakit tayo mahirap? Ang history lang magkakasabi niyan. Bakit tayo mahirap? Kung hindi natin alam ang history, we will continue to be poor. And our children will continue to be poor. Because only history will tell us how to cope with this problem.
All right. Professor.
Ang pagsisimula, kasi ang history po ay human self-knowledge. Kaya tayo iba kasi kaya natin alalahanin, tignan ano ang ginawa, ano ang nagawa, ano ang mga posibilidad na pwede pang gawin. So, kung gusto talaga natin malaman kung saan tayo magsimula tayo sa ngayon. Kasi yun lang naman talagang tinutuntungan natin. Pero gamitin natin ang ating kasaysayan para malaman kung ano na yung mga nagawa natin at para malaman natin kung saan tayo pupunta.
Okay. Yung kayang pagpunta sa magandang kalalagyan, yung kaya talagang daraan sa daang matuwid? Frank?
Ako, creative writer eh. I always think out of the box. Unahin mo muna yung saan mo gustong pumunta.
Saan mo gusto pumunta?
Sa magaling. Anyway, as a creative writer, I start anywhere. It should not be a problem where to start. Ngayon, if you think logically, you'll never start because what is the best step? Yun lagi iniisip mo eh. Pag logical ka, you will never decide which is the best step. Yan nangyayari doon sa hindi creative.
All right. Professor? Attorney? Public Trillana?
Maraming salamat po. Ang tanong po ninyo, it's a very deep question. It's not just historical, it's very philosophical. Where do you begin? Where do you end? I'll try to share with you, if you may. This is by David Bohm. David Bohm is one of the best physicists in the world. Bohm. B-O-E-H-M. One of the best physicists in the world. He is now considered one of the best. Ano po ang sabi niya? He has gone full circle. Not just a scientist. Look at what he says. The totality of existence is enfolded within each fragment of space and time, whether it be a single object, thought, or event. Thus, everything in the universe affects everything else because they are all part of the same unbroken whole. Collectivity. Now, this thought is not just his as a physicist. This is a thought that is current through all the ages, from Rig Vedas to the present, even to the Kapatirans here in the Philippines. Even Nan, who is a Buddhist who just only died this year. Even the great Benedict or Augustine of the Roman Catholic Church. In other words, scientists now have come to realize, remember, they were saying science and religion, science and faith, they are antithetical to each other. And yet the scientists now are saying, no, this is exactly what the Bible is saying. I am you and you are me. So where do you begin? You begin with yourself. If you do not begin with yourself, do not ask somebody else to begin. Because what you do, the little thing that you do for yourself and you become better for the rest of the world. And when you become better and the rest of the world becomes better, all of us becomes better because we are all part and parcel of an unbroken whole. Exactly what Rizal said. He said, this is what Rizal said. Will my fate be like that of water, never to be lost into nothingness? What was he asking? He does not want to remain in the stream of time and space where all the problems are. The stream of time and space. He wanted to go beyond that. That's why he said he was immortal. This is our national hero. A hero not only political, a hero that's very, very spiritual, a hero that is actually, to tell you the truth, he is recognized in many countries in the world. The Spanish crown, the Spanish king, is a member of the Order of the Knights of Rizal. When he was given that order, he said, I have to say sorry to the Filipinos because it was we, through the dark Spain, that actually killed Rizal. Because Rizal loved Spain. Above all, Rizal loved everyone. Even the friars he loved. What he did not love, what the friars did. And that is the great Filipino. He is not only a great Malay, he is not only a great Filipino, he is a great man of the entire world. And that's the Filipino for us to see.
Thank you.
May tanong lang ako kay Atty.
Ops, may pahabol si Kamaning.
May tanong lang ako sa kanya. Kung alam ng Espanyol na mahal sila ng Pilipinas, bakit pinatay nila si Rizal?
It's, I think, precisely that. That's why...
It was the government.
That's why...
The friars also backed up the killing of Rizal.
That's why...
It was the government of Spain that ordered Rizal's killing. And also the government in the Philippines ordered Rizal's killing. If Rizal told them that he loved them, why did they kill him?
Okay. That was during the time of the darkest hour of the Black Flame. Okay. Mga kaibigan, mahalaga yung katagang binanggit ng kasama natin si Atty. Trillana. It was connectivity that you said? Oh, the problem in the Philippines seems to be collectivity. That is the problem, really. When you get to collect what is not yours, then we get into trouble. So, we'd like to thank everyone who took time out to be with us today. Issues about independence and our history. Thank you very much.